Oh my god!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Esports Hub Talk Show. My name is Campbell. I'm going to be hosting for you once again tonight. And joining along me are two faces that have been with us all the way. It's Tony from Bulldog and it's Paradox from, I guess, America. I guess you could kind of say. But joining him this time, though, he's brought a friend with him. He's brought a friend alongside him. He's brought Landon with him. And he's bowing down to him. He's bowing down.
Unnecessary,
Paradox.
but thank you, man.
Paradox. I'll tell you what. How about you introduce your American friend you brought with us?
Okay, so you want me to introduce Landon?
Yeah,
all
go
right.
on.
Oh gosh.
This man needs no introduction. I mean, look at that hair. I can't get over this hair. It looks absolutely amazing.
Oh,
But
gosh.
seriously, Landon, of course, works for UMG. I've had the pleasure of meeting with him many times over the past, year and a half, almost 2 years. Oh, jeez.
Something like that. Time has flown
It's been
by.
2 years, yeah. So this guy, of course, NNA, absolutely fantastic guy, great golden voice, fantastic caster person. Pleasure to have you on the show with us today.
Wow, Landon. What
That was the greatest introduction that
was
anyone's ever given
amazing.
me. Wow, that's
Wow,
awesome.
Paradox. That was absolutely amazing, that was. And obviously, I'll introduce my main man, Tony. How are you doing, Tony?
I'm good, mate. How you doing, bro?
I'm not bad. Well, guys, we're here with episode number 3 already. We found ourselves upon number 3. Previously, we've spoken about Gfinity, but now we're going to go across the waters over towards Paradox, a little bit closer to Paradox's home, a little bit closer to Landon's home as well. We're talking about one of the biggest events that we've seen for Call of Duty, but the biggest event for Infinite Warfare this year so far. It's MLG Atlanta, and we're going to see some of the best teams battle it out this weekend for that big grand prize pool and obviously those pro points. So kicking us off straight away then, let's talk about MLG Atlanta. Let's talk about MLG as an event. Now, one thing that I wanted to talk about and kind of throw out there immediately was the fact that I've never seen an event organizer before like MLG, where as soon as the players complain about something, it gets fixed immediately. There's a lot of things that MLG have changed so far. I know Adam App, for example, obviously the guy, if you're unaware of who that is, he's one of the leading guys over at MLG, and every single time any player sends him any sort of message or tweet and says, look, I'm not happy with this, he is there to change it straight away. So I have to ask you, Paradox, you're wearing the MLG shirt, you're representing them proud. MLG, in your eyes, I mean, as event hosts, good?
So, yeah, MLG, absolutely fantastic to work with, right? So since the first time I got to work with them back at the X Games in Advanced Warfare, I haven't had really any problems with how the events are run. Of course, sometimes, things go into late at night, but that happens with pretty much any tournament. That's something that a lot of scheduling and everything, you have to sort of go and fix that way. But even then, over the past year and a half, we've seen sort of start times on Friday get a bit closer and closer, like earlier and earlier in the day to sort of prevent that. I believe, remember back at Vegas, in-game happened. So a lot of matches were cut off pretty early. So you don't have that whole staying up, at least on the NA side, to like crazy hours at night watching a lot of these matches. I really don't have many bad things to say about MLG. I mean, a lot of people are upset with the stream schedule for Atlanta, but I feel like outside of that, even the change that we see for this tournament, pretty a round of applause, honestly, for them all the way around.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of just, because you've mentioned it, I think we should kind of talk about it while we're here. I mean, we're talking about MLG having a fantastic event and hosting great events through the year. But what is this stream schedule, guys? What is going on here? Landon, you got anything to give me on this?
I mean, to be honest, man, I'm sure there's a lot of things kind of going on in the background regarding, the stream schedule ish thing. Obviously, I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm not even going to lie. I don't even know how it's all going to work because I'm obviously not going to be watching it on stream or anything like that. But, like Paradox said, just to add on, I mean, MLG has been always a fantastic, company to work with. I mean, just from a caster's point of view, they treat you very, very well, and whatnot. And they've always, like you said, been very, very adapting to what the community has kind of brought up to them, regarding like the business side. Of course, that's how the streaming works. So, well, I'm not super familiar with that side and, obviously can't talk about it in depth that way. It is unfortunate, but I think a lot of the stuff that they do on the other side of like making the event for the players, they do a great job of making it as competitive as it possibly can be. So
there you go. Awesome breakdown for that one there. But I mean, let's slowly move into the groups then. The groups have already been drawn for these ones. Let's take a look, decide which one we think is group of death, which one we think is going to be a walk in the park. So let's take a look at Group A, starting this one off then. And I'm going to come to you, Tony. Rise Nation, FaZe Clan, Infused, and Enigma 6. And then obviously that open bracket team that's going to come through as well. So, I mean, Rise, FaZe, Infused, Enigma 6. I mean, how's it looking for you, Tony?
Right, I'm going to stick with my prediction from last week. I think Rise and FaZe are going to do it. I think Infused are going to do well. I rate Infused. I just think Rise and FaZe might have too much over the series of the entire group. I'd be interested to see what Enigma 6 will do. I know some people really sing their praises and that, but I just still feel there's too much in Rise and FaZe. If they turn up and play their game, I think they're too good.
Awesome. And then I have to ask the question as well. So who do we think, kind of guess between, throw that out there, and anybody who gives me an answer first, what do we think is the group of death?
Pool A for sure.
Pool A?
I think hands down this is your group of death.
I'm saying D. I'm very off on that. I know that's totally an outside prediction.
Oh yeah.
From the point that I totally agree that the like level of competition as far as like on paper teams is way higher than A, and I don't know like the exact definition of group of death is. I think though that group D to me will be the most competitive one between the top three. I think Fnatic will be maybe up there a little bit, but I think those core three to me, like anything can happen in that. That's the only reason why I would say D. But I totally understand the warrant of saying A because I think based on everyone who's there.
And do you know what? That's quite interesting actually, Landon. That you mentioned Fnatic. Obviously, Fnatic is an EU organization, and I mean, what is it that in your eyes that you've seen from this Fnatic roster that's making them stand out for you?
I mean, to be honest, it's kind of clear cut in Europe right now, at least from my point of view. I mean, you have Orbit and Splice, the two at the top, Elevate, who's kind of right there with them, and in some cases, usually falls to them in the 2Ks. And then you have a few different teams kind of around there, like Infused, you have Aware, and you have Fnatic, maybe a few others if you want to kind of add them in there. Well, I think Fnatic is a really good team. I'm not sure if they can compete with their brothers, or I guess say like their European counter, I guess you could say, in Orbit, but I don't know, man. They're a good team. They had a fairly good performance at Gfinity London. I think they ended up getting second in their group, right behind Infused. They ended up losing to, I forget who they ended up getting knocked out by, but they ended up losing to Aware in the loser. So, they're a solid team. But when you got leadership like Tommy, and then the two young great Slayers and Scraps and Sunny B, along with Wiskin, so I'm not super familiar with him. I think they could definitely make some noise, but can they beat those three teams? I don't know. We'll see what happens.
I mean, that's the interesting topic as well, and I kind of want to fire it over towards you, Tony, with the experience from obviously having Wuskins on your team. I know we've previously spoke about him before being a part of the Bulldog team, but I mean, this is a major event for Wuskins. I mean, Gfinity, we spoke about was his biggest event yet, but MLG Atlanta, Tony, this guy's got to go all the way to America for like one of the biggest events of his life.
Mate, he'll love it. Like his mentality is like he won't be fazed by it, and you've got to remember he's got his brother with him. You know what I mean? It isn't like he's a kid going out there with no one. He's got Tommy, who's like EU COD royalty. So he's got him, who's been in the game forever. You couldn't probably ask for a better person to be there to give you moral support. He's got his brother with him, and he's got Sonny, who was on last week, who's as sound as anything. You know what I mean? It isn't. And like I said, I know the kid. He won't get fazed at all. Like he'll be fine. He'll be fine. He's a good player. I've got a bit of a crush on the two brothers, so like I'm always going to say this. But I honestly think he'll be fine, mate. He's a proper down to earth sound lad, like.
Well, there you go then. So hopefully he doesn't get phased. So if he does get phased, let's hope he doesn't get phased literally in that one. Then Tony's saying, good luck for him and good luck to the rest of the Fnatic boys though. But like you said, one thing to pick up on what Landon said, I mean, when you've got a vocal leader like Tommy, doesn't matter whereabouts the event is, as long as he can get behind the team, I'm pretty sure they should have a good performance. But I want to focus on Group C a little bit because there's a team in there that when we were doing a breakdown of them previously going to Gfinity, we spoke about Weeman, we spoke about individuals on the team. I want to talk about Team 3G. Now, Team 3G to me had a fantastic performance at Gfinity, but now they're going to go up against some of the best. Now, the likes of Luminosity and Cloud9 are in this bracket, in this group as well. And let's be honest, in terms of Cloud9, when Aches gets shouty and Aches gets behind you, I mean, it can start to rock teams a little bit. Aches does get quite loud, let's be honest. But I mean, Team 3G in that bracket, they've got the likes of Elevate to go up against, which they would have had practice against. But against Luminosity and Cloud9, are we really seeing much success for them?
So I'm going to hop in on this one. 3G, what are you looking at? Quicker, Nile, Weeman, and Zerg, right?
Yeah.
I feel like they played up to a lot of the competition in London. I'm really not 100% sold on them in this pool. I think the good thing that we can look at is they might come out and squeak out third here because honestly, I'm not 100% sold on Luminosity right now either. Like, they've looked a little bit shaky. I have faith on them when it comes to a LAN environment, like just the experience of these players. But honestly, I'm getting some shades of like last year when we talked about Octane when they were on Rise Nation and everything. And they sort of like went away and just like what happened to this team halfway through the year. I just have this huge question mark over LG. I don't know how they're going to perform. And even then, looking at their matchup, this game against 3G is 5 p.m. on Friday is where it's scheduled for. And that's the second one that LG is going to get. So LG is going to beat 3G, 100%. They play Cloud9 first. Even if they lose that one, I have enough faith in them to take out 3G in that matchup.
So are you going to kind of throw that one out there then? If we saw Team 3G able to take down Luminosity Gaming, I mean, are you guaranteeing possibly first or second? Or do you think there's too much more competition in there just for one win against Luminosity to secure a spot?
Looking at that, I mean, they might be able to squeak out second, but I feel like the most they'll get is third.
All right, then there you go. That's Paradox's prediction on that one. But one of my favorite groups, and I've left it till last, and I know we will move on a little bit because we did talk about this last time on the show when we had Sunny B joining us. But in Group B, and I have a massive crush on Team Allegiance, right? I love Team Allegiance. I honestly think
they love you as well, mate.
I really hope they do. I really hope I hope Team Allegiance, Sinful, my man out there, Sinful, if you're watching, follow me on Twitter. Anyway, Casting Squad Campbell. Anyway, so Team Allegiance, I have that thing for. And it's Sinful. I remember tweeting out, I think it was MLG Vegas he was playing out, and I remember tweeting out, Sinful, like, you've really done good for yourself. You know, there was a lot of pressure against him. He's teaming with some veterans in the scene, and he had a really good performance at Vegas, and I hope that he can go and replicate that. But I've got to throw it out there, he's got Splice and Optic Gaming in the group. I mean, anybody want to give me an opinion of Team Allegiance? Do they stand a chance against what you possibly could say, one of the best teams in Europe and one of the best teams in America? Open discussion.
Yeah, why not? Mate, look, on the day anyone can beat anyone. You've seen it at plenty of events. Optic ain't at their best at the moment.
Okay.
Splice are good, but they're still beatable. Like, that's another difficult group. You know what I mean? I said this last week. I don't think there's any easy group, and there's no real certainties in those groups. I wouldn't put my money down on any of those teams finishing first. You know what I mean? The teams you could say are going to be in the top two, but if I had a big wad of cash and you said put it down on the team and winning that group, then I wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, and I wouldn't do it. So yeah, they've got a chance. I think Splice and Optic will come first and second, but there's nothing to say that it isn't going to happen. You know what I mean? At all. Like, there's so many good teams in here, and like I said last week, the open bracket teams could throw it open because you could get a really strong open bracket team that's played loads of games over the weekend and is going to come into it hard and hit everyone.
Well, the interesting thing to talk about is recently we saw some Australian teams get announced that they're going to be attending MLG Atlanta. The likes of Mindfreak are going to be there. Now, if you guys cast your mind back, literally, Mindfreak, cast your mind back to the Australian CWL, they were a team that did very, very well. But the only thing that I have to say, though, is, and this is nothing against the Australian region whatsoever, because Europe have been through this as well, where we've been chasing America for a very long period of time. But I just don't think Australian Call of Duty is at the level to compete with some of the teams in the EU and the NA region. Mindfreak, they look like a strong team. They have a strong roster, but that's against Australian teams. Now, I'm going to throw it out there, boys, and this is for open discussion. I mean, talking about open bracket team in Mindfreak, can you see the likes of those four lads really putting up a fight against some of the teams in these groups?
I mean, I haven't watched them play, but they could have a different sort of meta about playing. You know what I mean? They could play in a slightly different way. Then when it comes to playing us, it could be, you know what I mean, hit the Achilles heel with some of the bigger teams because they've obviously not going to have played against them. Don't know how much time they're going to have spent watching their game. Their S&D and their uplink. I done a jack and it got the name wrong. Their S&D and their uplink could, you know what I mean, just be a total nemesis to anything we play. But my opinion, obviously, it's anyone else's.
Well, that's quite interesting because I'm gonna wind up Landon and Paradox a little bit here and talk about the fact that we all know EU are better at S&D than America, right? I mean, that's just a fact. Okay.
I mean,
you could start firing stats at me, but I'll tell you now, EU will be at NA in most S&D games. So talking about Australia, right? And kind of backing off what you said, Tony, you're right. They could be like an absolutely insane uplink team. They play uplink very, very differently, let's say, to the way that we play it, and they take the odd uplink. I mean, S&Ds win series, and if you can be a team that just plays so differently to the rest of the competition that they're used to playing against, then yeah, I guess you could take it from anywhere. I mean, it's so difficult to say because we're talking about these groups. We're talking about Group A today, and we're talking about how strong and how packed they are and how hard it's going to be for a team to get out of them. But we have to talk about those open bracket teams. There's so much good competition that could come and stir up so many of those placings in those groups that it's so difficult. Like you said, Tony, I couldn't put money on it either. For all we know, an open bracket team could come into this and end up top in the group. You know, it's so difficult to say. Anything could happen in this, and I think that's why we're going to see one of the most competitive events, and it kind of ties me into what I want to say next, which was Aches. Now, if any of you guys see on Twitter Aches' tweet about the MLG Atlanta event, when he was talking about the 3 different types of teams we're having coming to the event, did you manage to catch it?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I know I saw a positive tweet from Aches, which is,
Yeah, so that's another one. I mean, for the first time in a long time, Aches, I think, was actually congratulating an event being run normally. But what it was really, really interesting and quite cool to see about his tweet is he mentioned that this is what we used to have in Call of Duty, right? We used to have regions like Australia used to come over, and it used to be the EU teams, it used to be the NA teams, and they would all battle it out in this massive, as Paradox has referred to in the past, bloodbath kind of tournament where we don't know who's going to win. It could be anybody. And he was talking about the fact that this is anybody's game. I couldn't imagine one team going into this that's going to think that they could beat everybody because there's just so much competition. I mean, there's 100 and something plus teams and 200 grand on the line. He was referring this to an event like Champs, but we've actually got another major, and then we've still got Champs to look for in the future. So, like you said, Paradox, it's great to see positivity from the man Aches. It's been a long time since we've seen that. But, this is why it's just so difficult. We just don't know where this one's going to go. But, I mean, I'm going to ask that really difficult question now. And I've talked about how we don't know where this is going to go, but I'm going to ask you for first, second, third. Probably the hardest question in terms of the amount of teams we've got going here, but I'm going to go one by one, and I'm going to start with you, Paradox. I always start with you. I never give you any time.
Of course.
Never give you any time. So I want your first, second, and third place prediction for this event.
For the entire event, first, second,
the entire event.
Man, come on. You put me on the spot like that? Even when I said, what was it, like last week I was up to, or the week before, I was up to like 5 a.m. thinking of who would play.
See, you get more time than we do. You get more time than we do.
Come on.
You're well prepped for this, mate.
Yeah,
when we're
all sleeping and dreaming about good stuff, you're thinking about predictions, so you should already know this.
Literally, other night, go to that jersey behind you from Thingy, and you put that on, get into bed, and just sit there writing out all the possibilities. Like
MLG Atlanta, what's going to happen? So, what do you think's going to happen, Envy? Oh, I don't know.
I'm going to throw this up. I'm saying FaZe, number 1.
If there's no EU team in this, you will not be on the next podcast.
Okay. All right. I'll take you for that. I'm going FaZe.
Yep.
I think.
Hope you other two boys are ready. Eddie.
Splice.
Ooh.
And Optic. I'm going to bring in Optic just. I feel like that's the 3 right there. I'm not even 100% sure.
Let's be honest.
This event is ridiculous.
Let's all be honest, guys. Paradox threw that last one in there because he doesn't want to get hated on Twitter by the Optic fanboys. He wants to be on the good side of Optic.
Last week. I'll take it again.
That's it. He's saving it. He's literally saving himself. Right then, we're going to come to you, Tony. Top 3, first, second, third, please, mate.
Right. I reckon that they're going to surprise everyone. Right. And I reckon Optic are going to win this.
Ooh.
Right. Bit of a ballsy one, I know. Okay. I reckon that. So I think Splice might come second as well. Splice but do you know what? Right? I'm going to put this out here just because of how they've been improving. I think Elevate impressed me quite a lot at Gfinity, and I think they played a lot better than the first event that they played at, and they look more as a team. I think Reedy's playing well. I know when he got knocked out, he had issues with his controller, didn't he? So he was playing on someone else's controller for the game they actually lost. But before then, I think they were looking quite tidy. So I've got a feeling that, do you know what? I hope that they can nick it into the top 3rd spot. They've been improving. If they carry on improving, I think they're just as good as Splice. Interesting.
So then, Landon, it's down to you then. So we've had 2 American teams and a European team. We've had 2 European teams and an American team. Do you agree, though, both these 2 guys put Splice in second place? Is that something you agree with?
I would. It's like I said, it's really hard to make predictions because it's like this is such a competitive event that it's like anything could happen. Plus, you also, like we already talked about this a minute ago, we have so many talented open bracket teams from basically all over the world that are going to be competing as well that could easily change the entire tide of a pool. Like we look at MLG Vegas, E6 comes in 3-0s and 9-0s their entire pool. Like whoever would have predicted that? Like E6 is a good team, but who never known what they would have done that. I don't mind at all putting like a European team, especially like Splice, who I think has better matchups versus everyone except for Orbit. Like they match up versus I think that Splice matches up against every other European team better than Orbit, but they're just not as good as Orbit when they verse them directly. I don't know if it's at least in the 2Ks that I've been able to see. Every time that Splice happens to go up against Orbit, they just don't have it happen. But they can wreck like Elevate, they can wreck the Infuses, they can wreck Fnatic, whatever. As far as my top personal 3, I think like you could literally put a whole lot of other teams up here. In my predictions, I put up FaZe. In my personal predictions, based on how I have each pool going, they have great matchups depending on whichever group they face off against. So first seed playing up against second seed in winners bracket. They have great matchups no matter what, at least as far as my predictions go. So I have FaZe in first. I don't think you can ever count out Rise Nation. Granted, they've not been doing well at all online. But they've never really been known as an online team. They've won a few like of the ESL tournaments, like 25Ks back at Black Ops 3. But besides that, though, they've never really been known as an online team. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. And then, just for kicks, I'm going to throw out Optic. I think Optic has been looking very solid recently, but in the matchup versus FaZe, I don't think they're ready for that yet. And the one thing that it's really a shame for me that I think would definitely change everyone's predictions with that if map vetoes were introduced, because it's so hard to predict based on random map scenes. Because the casters, people who are watching this, the players, they don't know what maps they're going to play. So if you find Optic playing in a breakout hardpoint, most of the time they're going to get wrecked in the first hardpoint because they're not good at that map. However, you find them on a Scorch or something like that, another different map, then you could see them winning. So to me, that's just the one thing that COD needs to change. I think it would help everyone's predictions if map vetoes were introduced. But to kind of put my long spiel at an end, I have FaZe, Rise, and OG. You could definitely throw like a Splice, I think, in there to be fair, and maybe like a C9 or something like that. So I don't know, something like that.
Wow, the absolute in-depth analysis there from Landon.
I know.
If any of you missed that, it's all right. We do a previous broadcast and it's on YouTube as well. So don't
even go there. You literally talk to the cows come up. These are meant to be 30-minute podcasts. I've got 45 minutes of you talking.
I've had my throne taken. Landon's taken it. He's going to be sat here next week, guys. Tune in. Landon's going to be sat here.
Yeah, it's kind of absurd how long I can talk for, man. I don't.
No, it's good though. It's good to get an in-depth prediction though. But while we've been having this conversation, guys, you've been getting involved in the Twitch chat. Let's take a look at some predictions and see what the guys. I'm going to fire them out to you guys, and you let me know what you think with these individual people's opinions on this one. Okay, so first thing is going to be Beachy Meister. What a name! Fantastic, I love it. Optic, Splice, FaZe. Okay, do we agree? And we got a few nodded heads. I think
I can see that. Yeah.
Okay, then awesome. Splice in second place again. Shunga just comes in with the hashtag Green Wall. Got hashtag Green Wall fan. I'm surprised he didn't ask what time do Optic play. But going on to the next one anyway, Darwin's official has gone with FaZe, Orbit, and E6.
Could happen.
Okay.
That's a risky one.
That's an interesting one. It's like FaZe is getting, FaZe and E6 are getting thrown into the fire. That is the first matchup that we're going to even see in Atlanta. And what, E6 go from there, and I think they play Rise after that. It's going to be hard for E6. Like, we even go back to just like the discussion we had on Pool A and how stacked that is. These teams are getting thrown like one after the other. You don't really catch a break. So when you get into some of the bracket stages, if E6, if they start in losers or if they start in winners, I feel like after having all those competitive matchups in pools, that might actually be something that we might see. This is a team that plays up to their competition, and they might be able to sneak in there.
That's one thing I'm worried about with. Oh, sorry.
No, carry on, London. Speak freely, man.
I would say one thing that I'm worried about for E6 though through this tournament is obviously since classic weapons are banned. That was a thing that was huge at Vegas for teams who knew about the OSA meta. I know it's kind of funny. As soon as like E6 went through the open bracket and then made it into their pool, I actually casted over the E6 versus Rise match. And as soon as E6 played Rise and they 3-0'd them, Rise ended up starting using OSAs throughout the rest of the tournament. And then you'd see FaZe start using OSAs throughout the tournament. It's like E6 had like that little idea or had like that strategy kind of coming into it. So I think with the OSAs being taken out, well, just classic weapons in general being taken out, that to me really hurts them a lot. Yeah. And then you also look at their matchup versus FaZe, and if you have been keeping it with the NA 2Ks, in the last 3 2Ks I think that there's been, they have a 1-9 record versus FaZe in the 2Ks. They're always getting knocked out by FaZe, which is really, really unfortunate for them. So I think E6 has to literally beat Rise Nation and Infused and an incredibly talented open bracket team, most likely, to make it through. So I don't have anyone predicting E6. I just think it's going to be a very, very long road for them to make it through. So.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, so definitely we can agree then if they did make it through there, it'd be a very well-deserved third-place finish, obviously, with the teams that they've got to beat. But Darwin's official said in the chat as well, E6 have the fire. They are hungry, so I think they will do well. It's kind of similar to what you said there, Landon.
Mate,
obviously,
you put 200 grand in front of any of those, they're all hungry.
There you go. That's very true. That is very true. But E6, you know, like you said, they got the fire. Are they going to be able to do it? But we're going to go on to someone else's prediction as well. So Inzim, I've probably butchered your name. I do apologize if I have. But he said FaZe, OG, and C9. So he's got faith in Patty Aches of getting that third place finish. I mean, what do you guys think? Aches is going to get a third finish?
That'd be the dream. I feel like lineup. OG versus C9, OG versus FaZe.
Yeah.
Just the storylines.
Oh, you've got to think as well, actually.
I mean, we can see it. Kyle, that's definitely something that can't happen. I know Zim, he's a good guy.
That reminds me, because I when you said OG C9 storyline, I was kind of starting to think to myself, when was there a storyline? But it was when C9 obviously knocked out OG at Call of Duty Championships. Interesting. Maybe if that was the case, then that'd be something exciting to look forward to. And then Dredge Charity Stream came in and said Rise, Optic, and E United. So E United up there. I mean, in terms of E United, obviously they're one of those teams with all that speculation of they're an online team. Is that kind of the similar feeling you're getting? I mean, you agree there, Landon? Is that where you're coming from? Really?
It's United to me is probably the most questioned team coming into this tournament, maybe besides like Allegiance from North America. Just because you don't know how they're going to perform, and I feel like every time that we have, at least from the North American side, always doubted someone to be like an online player. Or there was an Advanced Warfare with all like the come up guys. They ended up proving us wrong. Octane, when he was on Justice, everyone was like, "Oh my god, this guy's a joke," and then he becomes like the third best AR player in the entire game. So United to me, you know, they didn't have the greatest run at MLG Vegas. I know they ended up getting destroyed by Envy. That was not a fun one to cast. And then they ended up beating FaZe, I think like a game 5. So you started to see toward the end like a little bit there. But there's just something about this team that just clicks. And to me, like the communication isn't really there. So I'm kind of leaning toward the fact that it is connection, but I had them moving pretty far in their pool. I just kind of went for something random. I think there's something there. I just don't know how it translates from online to LAN in that way, with how quickly they're going to have to like make this happen, because they've developed some insane rivalries versus both FaZe and OG, especially recently. So
awesome. Right then. So there is our MLG Atlanta discussion. You've had our 3 predictions. Thank you very much as well, everybody that got involved. But we are still going to be live for a little bit longer. So if you do have some predictions and necessarily don't want to put it in the Twitch chat, but want to be heard on our Twitter page, then make sure you use the hashtag ESHUB, hashtag ESHUB. We'll put it in the chat for you as well, so you know what you're using. And let us know on Twitter. If you want to ask a question to any of these guys, you can ask them to myself, or you can ask it to Tony Paradox or Landon about any of their predictions or about what they think will happen at MLG Atlanta. Then make sure you tweet in, but we are paying attention to the Twitch chat as well. So do get involved with our talk show. That is exactly what we want you to do. Let's move on a little bit though, okay? Let's talk about teams that are trying to get to the event. Let's talk about a man called Parasite, okay? Recently made a tweet saying, come on guys, I need a little bit of help here. Here is my GoFundMe. I need $5,000 to get to, is it? Well, now it wasn't MLG Atlanta, it's ESWC, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right. So that's for ESWC. He needs $5,000. Now, somebody who's actually in our scene, Tony, and when I say our scene, is a little bit closer to us, we know a lot, is Jacko. Now, Jacko was very vocal towards Parasite about this, and they actually went back and forth with each other on Twitter. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, and you don't really know what GoFundMe is or anything like that, GoFundMe is a page that you could personally set up, and people could donate towards you, okay? So people do it for charity causes, people do it for various things. Parasite is a professional player, which, if you guys will know from following the scene, obviously was once a world champion back in Black Ops 1. Black Ops 1 or Black Ops 1, wasn't it? Black Ops 2, sorry. Black Ops 2, there was my... Call myself a
Sunny
caster.
B all over again?
Call myself a caster, and I don't even know what game Parasite was a world champion in. But, yeah, so talking about that, he set up a GoFundMe so that he could have his team be funded to ESWC after they parted way with Red Reserve. Now, the argument was that he'd something like 190 grand, I think, was his overall earnings as a player. That was found on the internet somewhere and used against him. Now, I've had conversations like this with a lot of people in the scene about this one, and personally, I'll give you how I feel on it, and then you guys can add or tell me what you think of it. I don't think he basically asked on Twitter if people would help him. He didn't force people to fund him, right? He didn't go, okay, I really you have to donate to me. You have to I won't be able to do this. You please, you have to donate to me. He was an open question to the community that basically said, if you have the decency and he would really like to help send my team to ESWC, please, then obviously fund. However, the other side to the story is this is his job, right? This is his profession. At the end of the day, if you can't go to an event, you can't go to an event. And I understand the drive that he needs to be there and he needs to compete, because especially with this new pro point system, without this pro point system, if he misses out on that one event, he might never make it to the CWL LAN League. But in my eyes, I don't necessarily think it was a bad idea. I think he probably shouldn't have gone the way about it he did, but I can kind of understand where he's coming from, and I never really forced it down anyone's throat. Now, what does the table think? What's the open discussion on that one?
Right. This is it.
Boom!
There's two... I'm going to offend people. Right, there's two chains of thought here, right? And I think you covered both chains, but I'm going to put it more... The reason I'm here in it. Right, so basically, you've got... I don't want to insult people, but the sort of manly side of this, right? The non-sort of gaming fluffy community thing. And I'll explain why I say that. It's because, when I was younger, obviously I'm a little bit older, there weren't all this internet thing.
No.
Yeah, there weren't all this internet thing. So it was a case of you insulted someone, you got a slap for it, you know what I mean? And it was just a bit more, I'm in the army as well, so it was a bit rough and tough and that. And in the community thing, it's okay to insult people and not expect no comebacks, and everyone should love each other and all there to support each other and all that stuff. And it's not the real world, you know what I mean? Jacko, I think he's a roofer. So he's a lad that goes to work every day, right? He wants to be a pro, but he goes to work every day to subsidise his playing. So he pays for himself to get to work. He works his nuts off. He comes home at the end of the day, and then he sits and plays COD for as many hours as he can, probably going to work tired the next day. So to him, I think it's a case of wait a minute, if we're doing it, right? If you ain't in a pro team, you ain't got a pro contract, you're not a pro, right? You've earned enough money over your career. I'll pay for myself to go to ESWC. You've won 190 grand over the time. Why can't you pay for yourself to go? And I think that's the angle he was coming from. It was don't take the piss out of these people. Some of them are kids, you know what I mean? Giving you your pocket money so you can go and play a computer game. And I'm pretty certain, knowing Jacko, that's his attitude. He's a switched on lad. I had him in the youth team, and a little while ago he was 15 going on 50. You know what I mean? He's the oldest 15-year-old in his mind that I've ever known. And like I said, I think that's his attitude. I think it's a case of, look, don't take the mick. You've got enough money. Well, you should have enough money, unless that prostitute, that porn star, that he had around his ass. You know what I mean? Unless he needed some of that to get around.
Out now.
But he had her on stream, innit, sitting at the back of the thing. But unless you're wasting your money on women, you should have enough if you won 190 grand 3-4 years ago to be able to afford a flight to France. I know he looked as well online. You could do it for 2.5 grand instead of 5 grand. He put up pictures of all the stuff. He's like, look, that's a hotel there. You can stay for 4 people, 4 flights on to cover the dates, the ticket. So it was only actually 2.5 grand to get there. So that's one side. And like I said, I felt like that a little bit. Then you've got the other side, and you've got the people that are part of the community, the pros and that. And a lot of them come out and supported him and said those things. Look, he ain't forcing no one. He's only asking. I think some of that's because they're covering their backside in case they ever need it. If they make this acceptable, that people that ain't picked up in a team can get other people to fund them, it suits them. And they've got a loud voice, you know what I mean? So if you see people coming out going, no, it's all right. He's not forcing no one. He's only asking. It's all right to sort of beg for someone to pay for you to go and play a computer game in another country, you know what I mean? Have a lad's holiday. It's fine, don't worry about it. Because soon, we're all going to be doing it, you know what I mean? As soon as we get shot from our teams, we need to make all these games, so we need to make you think that this is okay. And you know what? Do I want to see him there? Yeah. Am I going to give him the money to go? No. But if people want to give him the money, he's not spending it on drugs. You know what I mean? Like, so it ain't the end of the world, but I understand where Jacko's coming from, in my point of view.
I think the interesting thing that we could possibly talk about here in terms of difference of situation. Now, if we go back an episode to where we were talking about Benji and the old Aware squad, now they were wanting to go to MLG Atlanta, but they never tweeted out, "Oh, I need to go fund me because we're not going to be able to go to MLG Atlanta." And they every single day they tweeted, they retweeted, they messaged, they DM'd so many organizations to be given the opportunity, because that's what organizations are for. Funding teams to events and having teams represent them is what organizations are for. If you take that out and everybody just funds the pro players and there's no such thing as organizations, then you lose teams.
Do you know what, mate? From an organization's point of view, it also creates a really difficult situation where people that get dropped for teams and are no longer on a pro team, for example, still expect the same level of funding and looking after. It's like me losing my job as a soldier now, sitting there and going, right, I want everyone to keep me in the lifestyle that I'm used to, although I'm not employed at it. The day I walk out the army, I'm no longer a soldier until if I decide to go back. And it's my impression sometimes with the players that I know I've tried to sign players, and because 3 years ago they played for a pro team, they won't play for no one if you're not giving them a salary. And it's like, wait a minute, no one wants you. You know what I mean? Your value is what people will pay for you. And if no one's willing to sign you, you're not worth that money. Like, you have to either go for less or fund yourself, in my opinion. You can't ask people to continually keep up this lifestyle. You know what I mean? Either get better, put the time in, or accept that maybe, you know what I mean, this ain't for you and it's time to get another job. Like.
Well, there you go. Then that's the opinion from myself and Tony, the kind of EU side of things. But let's fire it over to Landon and Paradox, though. I mean, Parasite is obviously a player from your scene and has been around for ages, and I'm sure you two have watched him for years and years to come. And obviously, let's be serious. He's not been the most liked person in the scene in the past of Call of Duty. He has a lot to say sometimes, and sometimes it can come back to bite him on the arse. Now, I have to ask you the question: do you agree with it? Do you not? If it was a different pro player, let's say, for example. Actually, I'm gonna make a scene for you, and I'm gonna set a situation up for you. Oh. Let's say this was Scump, right? He'd have that in my eyes. He'd have that $5,000 in minutes, right? In Parasite, is this not happening because it's Parasite, or because of the way he's going about it?
I think he'll get the money, like.
Yeah, I mean, Paradox, Landon, do you think? I mean, from the American perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Landon. I'll let you go first on this one.
Okay. So like I didn't really know what to think whenever I first saw this. First thing that I thought was that it is kind of on the basis of lack of communication for Red Reserve. Obviously the organization that they were technically under, but not going to be under anymore. That was obviously like a big mistake from them. You can't expect to have a team and then like. I know Red Reserve, this is their first time, I think, being introduced into esports. I think this is the first time ever having a Call of Duty team at least. I don't know if they've ever had anything else. I know they were like a branch off of FaZe for like the YouTube side for a while. Then they have tried to make themselves like a brand by their own. I think this is a little bit of a lack of communication within them to make a decision to pick up Parasite's team and then to not realize what they're kind of getting into and saying, oh, there's 2 tournaments coming up that we have to fully fund them to go over to Europe, which I know isn't obviously a cheap plane ticket to get or anything like that. And no offense, but they're kind of a long shot to win a whole lot of prize money, so there's not a big return on that either. So I think it was a big mistake by Red Reserve to not realize what they're kind of getting into before they get into it. And in that happening, they kind of in some ways screw over whoever's on this team to kind of fit in for themselves. As far as like Parasite having to tweet out and having to ask people for money and stuff like that, it's kind of become not like a trend. I don't want to say it's a trend by any means, but whenever there was an issue when it came down to the old Renegades team, whenever they were on DT, that was also a thing where they couldn't go to an event and they also had to ask people to pay. And it wasn't like asking people, it was like, hey, if you guys have anything, we're kind of screwed out here. We need to get to this event. And people obviously ended up funding them. It was a great thing that we ended up seeing. And I thought it was fantastic how it ended up working out. And I don't really mind it from Parasite's point of view. Granted, he has won a crazy amount of money. What he's done with that, not my business. I'm not really sure. But it's almost the fact of he shouldn't have to pay to go an event. None of these guys should have to pay to go an event because the organization should have done that. So to me, I kind of blame the organization's point of view from making this entire thing happen. And I think it's kind of like, whether your opinion or not is on Parasite, I just think he doesn't really know what to do because obviously they have to have a crazy amount of money to go to this event if they want to expect to compete because ESWC is huge for pro points right now. So
yeah, definitely.
I'm kind of in that same boat, right? I feel like, this comes at a terrible time. I mean, ESWC is very close. It's like a week away, right? And they're pretty much saying, okay, Red Reserve, we're not going to fund you anymore. So in their minds, I mean, you think of just this panic. It's like, oh crap, what are we going to do? Right? Like, we need to go to this event. And I mean, they're only asking, I know this sounds crazy, they're only asking for 5K, but I feel like if that's the goal that they're trying to hit, it seems like they're investing some of their own money into this. I feel like it's not just like, okay, people are fully funding them to go to this event. It's just saying, hey, if you can give us something, like, please help us out. I think he might have raised a good chunk of money from his stream last night, I believe. I think I saw him tweet out about that. But looking at this, I mean, I honestly feel bad for these guys. They really should be able to go to this event. This is a roster that I want to see compete, and I want to see them do well. I mean, regardless of what your opinion is on Parasite or some of the other players, I feel like this wasn't the first thing that they wanted to do, right? I feel like they get forced into a bad situation. It's like, what can we do? All right, let's see if we have people out there that'll support us. And we don't know, like, what's going on behind the scenes. They might be talking to, like, what I saw Big Snacks tweet at Parasite, and it's like, I might be able to help you out. So they might go under justice. They might end up having some organization pick them up. I feel like this is just a last-ditch effort. And if they can get to the event, I really want to see them there, and I wish them the best of luck.
Now, interestingly, I kind of want to throw a question out there. So, with teams like the X-Aware, which is Benji and Johansson and that, who've just been picked up by their organisation, and in, for example, in terms of Parasite as well, let's say Justice picked them up. I mean, do you think there is a level of added pressure for those players to perform, or are they just like, well, it's an organisation, like, we're going to go and compete, but if we don't get the place we want, we don't really care about the organisation? Or do you think there's that, like, added pressure where they're like, you know what, guys, we could be the real mugs of social media if this messes up?
I feel like it puts a good amount of pressure on them, right? It's just from being in this position and then going to that event. I mean, you're going in with a roster that a lot of people don't have faith in, to be honest, or at least not as much faith as you'll have in, like, an Optic or a FaZe and, such and such. But this is a roster. I mean, at least from Parasite's point of view, I know people are saying, oh, he's playing all these other games and he's doing this, he's doing that. Some of the same conversations people have around some of the Optic players. It doesn't mean that he's not dedicated to the game. I mean, we've seen this guy perform at a very high level year after year, and whether or not he's, like, a divisive person in the community or not, I feel like there's some sort of added pressure on them, and that'll even... I mean, it might come back to hurt them. It might end up helping them. But I feel like anytime you're in this sort of position, it puts a lot more pressure on you than if you were just under the organization as a whole and you're just going to prove yourself. Now it's like you're going to prove yourself, but now people have made a huge investment to you at very short notice.
Well, we would have given you some open bracket discussions as well. We would have talked about some of the open bracket teams, but they're yet to be announced yet. So do stay tuned, and we'll make sure on the Esports Hub channel that we do retweet a few of those for you, maybe even mention a few of them as well. And on our next podcast, we could possibly talk about them. Obviously, ESWC is coming up as well, and we will be rounding up everything that we saw at MLG Atlanta. But good luck to all the teams this weekend. Now, one last question I want to throw out to everybody before we do disappear. I want to throw out the question, which is your dark horse prediction. Okay, so you've given me your top three. Pick an individual team that not necessarily has the place in the top three, but a team that you think will have a great performance that not many people will expect. And Paradox, I'm going to save you this time, mate. I'm going to go the opposite way. So I'm going to go to Landon.
Okay. As far as dark horse, I mean, I could go to the open bracket. It's kind of risky to do that just because of the fact, I mean, it's such a tightly contested open bracket that anyone could kind of make it through. Anyone could have different results. There's so many little additives that kind of go into it. I think one team that's kind of like a sleeper team outside of my personal top three who I think could definitely make an impact would be Envy. Envy has not had a good performance when it comes down to their online tournaments. I believe on like the January 22nd one, they destroyed everybody and like just had like a huge tire. I think they beat like FaZe in the grand finals. They beat E United. They beat Optic. They beat LG. Like they beat everybody. And whenever it was like, I think it came down to a interview with like Deserto or something like that. Apathy was like, we just basically practiced like every single scrim was at an event. And that happened like once, and then they kind of faded off a little bit. I think they had like a top 8 placement, like a top 15 placement their last two, at least the most recent 2Ks. So to me, they're a sleeper team. They didn't have a good performance at MLG Vegas because of the fact they didn't have any practice coming into it with Apathy getting married. So I don't, not that I don't blame them for that, but you can't really expect them to have a whole lot of, preparation. I think you could definitely throw out a few other names as well, like E United. But Envy to me is just like that one always solid LAN team who hasn't had performances yet. So I don't think a whole lot of people are having their main focus on them. So
awesome. Thank you very much, Landon. So then, Tony, who's your dark horse prediction for this one?
I'm going to go with Fnatic just because it's got the brothers on it.
I bet none of you expected that one.
I told you, mate, out of the EU teams, they got me out. I just love the brothers to bits. And I want them to do well. Look, they got Tommy, mate. Anything could happen. So, yeah, they're, like I said, you said a dark horse as well, you know what I mean? So people that sort of think they're going to come in that spot in their group. But if they turn up, I know how good Buskin's going to play on that. And if they all click for them, then I'm sure they'll do well.
Awesome. And Paradox, you've had enough time to think. You've had since 5 o'clock this morning and those last few minutes as well. So Paradox, who is your dark horse prediction?
I'm gonna go and back up Landon here with Envy. Honestly, that's what I was thinking. And then he comes out and says Envy.
Sold it on him. I was like,
all right, so if I'm not like my number one dark horse is Envy. If I'm going outside of Envy, I feel like maybe Elevate, honestly.
Okay.
Reedy, Watson, Shawnee, and Zed. I feel like they proved themselves in London for sure. They're one of the top 3 EU squads, arguably top 4, but I feel like you don't drop them out of that top 4 at all. And looking at the pool, once again, they have Cloud9, LG, and 3G in their pool. They can come out number 1 in that pool, honestly. And from there, I feel like this is a squad that people might sort of sleep on a little bit over and over again. So that's my second sort of dark horse, and that's a team I'm looking out for to make some waves here. Really
interesting, paying attention to the Twitch chat again. So Beachy Meister, the name I loved, said Epsilon make top 8. Now, Epsilon is a team that went past me for a while, but I kind of agree. That's a great dark horse prediction.
Oh,
yeah. Epsilon, obviously, they've got to come through open bracket with everything that happened. Not a bad shout. I honestly reckon Epsilon, could be one of those teams. It depends who they get, though, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of teams in the open bracket. It all depends who they get. But I think if they got a pretty, not as hard bracket pushing through there, I think they could make that
well
top
as well at Gfinity. They surprised some people. They were.
True, yeah. I mean, you never know as well with them. And this is why it's just so difficult for us. We'd love to give you like the top 3, and then next week, this weekend, it happens, and we look amazing.
We've never been right,
but we haven't been right yet. I mean, the crazy thing is as well, Tony, I actually got the closest with my stupid prediction for GFin, with saying where we're going to get towards the top end of the bracket, and they ended up doing it. But I think in terms of me, I think mine's got to be Team Allegiance. Team Allegiance boys.
That's fair, yeah.
This guy.
Fair.
Riding the wave of Mochilla's beard.
Hey, have you seen his beard? Have you seen his new picture? He's had that all shaved up.
Yeah.
Made me follow him and like his picture. And maybe he follows me back one day.
Friend.
Hashtag Team Allegiance, friends. Anyway, guys, that's going to round it up here for us at the Esports Hub Talk Show. Thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for getting involved, especially if you put something in the chat and were read out. Thank you very much. Make sure, though, you still put everything in that you want to. If you still wanted to put one more prediction in that hasn't come through yet, tweet it at us. We might pick it up next show. We might just talk about it, and you can have yourself featured on our show. I want to thank our guests. Well, I want to thank our guest first, which is Landon. Thank you very much for coming on. You're an absolute expert analysis person. Let's all give him a round of applause. Absolute in depth. And then the usual two I'm always stuck with, Paradox and Tony, but and just a typical thing. But
I think we're more stuck with you at this point.
Yeah, that's what it is at this point. That's what it is at this point.
Had no lights until I told you to turn the light.
See, yeah. He actually has light in his room this week.
I was living the typical gamer life. I'm literally trying to be a mushroom.
Still had your gimp gag on as well,
Tony, we told no one would say anything about that. It's my bulldog gimp mask as well. It's got a bulldog note on the side. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys, and good night.
He's going to look at the third, but he's so close. 7 over 3. Oh my god!